And we are recording. For everybody listening, if I'm speaking a little louder, we're having technical difficulties. So if I turn the mic up more, it's gonna get really bad for all the people listening. So instead, if I'm speaking more loudly, that's why. But it is Wednesday, October 8th, 2025 at 10:07 a.m. Eastern Time with Mr. Bazzel Baz. He is the founder of ARC, the Association for the Recovery of Children. It is the one thing I shill on this podcast. I like it's my job because I truly believe it's just the best thing that anyone's ever done ever. And it's in the link to every description, regardless if Baz is on the show or not. It is at the end of every Spotify episode, regardless if Baz is the guest or not. That is how much it means to me. They don't give me a penny, and I wouldn't take a penny. You guys can go to the description. You can find all the links, websites, all that good stuff. But what I had sent you last week, I think, was something along the lines of and I sent it to Mr. Prado as well. Something along the lines of U.S. DoD military action domestically and slash Title 50, which I know is that's ground branch and DoD is Title 10. And just like when I have doctors on, because I'm not a doctor, I always need to have an expert on when something kind of intense like this happens because I don't know if I'm being taken for a ride or not. So that's kind of what I wanted to hear your thoughts on.
Yeah, Tommy, thanks. You can hear me okay there?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting. I think any of us, we always, no matter if we're former military, active military, or civilians, we always get a little thrown off if all of a sudden we think about having our own military on our own soil. Although we forget that our own military was on our own soil back in the 1700s because we were invaded. So I think there's always a reason for Posse Comitatus. I think there's a reason why we have the National Guard here and why we use our conventional soldiers overseas to fight wars. And we do that so that we don't have them attack our shores mostly. But what has shifted, and I hope the American public can understand this, is that the enemy literally is on our shores. Now they say, well, I don't understand what you're talking about. It's just crime. No, it's beyond crime. Let me tell you what, when the Biden administration left the border open, we not only had UACs, undocumented, alien children, criminals from other countries, we had terrorists come on board, we had radical Islamics come on board. I mean, everybody just came through the floodgates. Now, so I can help put this in perspective for our audience. If all of a sudden you looked up in the sky and you saw thousands of enemy, whether it's Chinese, whether it was cartel, whether it was African, whether it was a country, and they were parachuting out of the sky and they were all armed to the full, to the max, and they were coming here and they were going to land in your town or your city and just start taking over and killing Americans, what would you want to happen? You'd want your military to fight them, okay? The same military that are qualified to fight them overseas. Well, what has happened, whether people see it or not, is that enemy is here, but they're not wearing uniforms right now. And we know this for a fact. So there is absolutely, our background, and we're pretty active when it comes to the latest intel in the country. I just left Washington. I was there for a week. These were some of the topics of discussion as well. But make no doubt about it, Tommy, the enemy is here. If you look at Dearborn, Michigan, I'll just take this as an example, and you listen to the Islamic community up there talk about overthrowing the U.S. government, getting rid of the Constitution and replacing it with Sharia law, that is not only treason, those are fighting words. Okay. So pay attention to that. I don't know of anyone out of the Islamic community when they say they're going to do something, they haven't followed through to do it. Now, let's take a look at the cartel that's running business here. You don't even see them. You don't know what they look like because you didn't research it or you're not educated enough. But guess what? They're well trained also. Look at what's happening in Mexico, and most people won't talk about this. Look at the alliance between Mexico and China and the stuff that's being offloaded on boats that's being placed in Mexico, not far from our border. Let's say, could it be that there are missiles there? I don't know. Could there? Could it be that some of the best weaponry in the world is being put in the hands of the cartel? Could it be that other armies are slowly infiltrating or being allowed to come into Mexico to attack our southern border? These are all realities that we deal with. So look at Antifa. Antifa, rightfully so, is a terrorist organization. Anybody who does their homework understands about Antifa overseas in Europe. They are supported by Marxists. They are a terrorist organization. You may think they're a bunch of kids running around in black outfits, but some of them are getting schooled and trained to do worse than that. So we will see here in the very near future, you will see Antifa fully armed. You will see Antifa killing ICE agents, and they will be assisted by everybody and anybody else that wants to overthrow the United States of America. So we sometimes we buy into the Marxist propaganda that it's just crime. It's just people that are upset. These people aren't about this country. They're not for this country. They don't want the Constitution. They don't want our history. They don't want anything. And you say, well, they're Americans. No, they're traitors, is what they are. And they should be hung with a short rope from a very tall tree. That's what death for treason. Okay. So when we see our military start to get on our soil here, they're going in primarily because it isn't that all law enforcement departments, police, sheriffs can't do some things, but the majority of those were hired out of the civilian pocket, and they will not be able to fight up against well-armed cartel, well-armed Antifa, well-armed Chinese, well-armed anybody, terrorist organizations. And I'll tell you what, if they're not paying attention to Dearborn, Michigan, and the Islamic community, then they're gonna stabbed in the back. Now people go, well, you sound like you hate people that are Islamic. My grandfather was a Muslim, okay, who became a Christian. All right. And he schooled me very well in Islam. So make no, don't be fooled by that. It is not a religion. It ranks right up there with socialism and communism and Marxism. That's why the Russians used it. That's why the Russians have supported Islam back in the earlier days, because it lined up side by side with all of the Marxist policies. Okay. And so we actually have the enemy on our shore. If you take a moment, listen to General Mike Flynn when he talks about this. Look, the guy's not blowing smoke. I know him very, very well. He won't speak unless he's got the evidence back up what he's saying, and it's all true. And so those discussions have been had in Washington. And when you're not getting the support of the Democratic Party, let's stop and ask why. Well, because they're Marxists. Okay. Many self-proclaimed Marxists, communists that don't want this country. They'll tell you they believe in the Constitution, and yet every single thing they do goes against the Constitution, pretty much so. So here we have been infiltrated over the course of many, many years, probably starting all the way back to Bush, Obama, Clinton, that whole gang of people, so to speak. And now you have 47 who loves the country more than they do and wants to protect the people. And so, yes, is he taking extreme measures? Maybe you see it as extreme. I see it as what has to be done because, and here's what's so funny about it. And you know this, Tommy, we've talked about this. The minute you have a terrorist organization, whether it's Antifa, radical Islam, the cartel, or whatever, destroy an entire police department and gun down a whole school and take over an entire city and just start killing people and cutting people's heads off, is the minute everybody's going to start crying and screaming, going, please help, please help, please help. Well, this administration isn't ready to wait for that to happen. They're much smarter than that. And so when you see military coming in, understand that it's under very controlled conditions, but they know the enemy, and they actually know the enemy better than most civilians know the enemy. I was just in Washington. I got to tell you what, since they deployed the National Guard there, I can't even tell you how safe it feels. I
Yeah.
mean, there were parts I was staying in a hotel just like last year, I couldn't walk down the street without thinking I was going to get robbed, or shot or killed. And now I'm walking in that same neighborhood, and there are people and families out there. And I mean, and there's the National Guard too, who aren't threatening. They're armed and they're walking around, but they're maintaining discipline and order. And guess what? It's what it took, and it was the right thing to do. And people seem happy, and people are speaking to each other instead of ignoring each other because they think, well, if I speak to you, you're gonna stab me with a knife, kind of thing, you know. So it doesn't always have to be that way, but until we clean up the country, um, and until we set down more of the same things that the administration is doing, like, you don't like this country, guess what? Let's ship you out of here. You know, they don't get it. This is not a free for all. It's not a free hall pass for you to use the Second Amendment to be treasonous and talk about the Constitution, how you want to destroy it. Anyway, so I'm encouraging all Americans, get behind the military if they show up, get behind the National Guard if they show up, get behind ICE because they're doing the right thing. All the other liberal yahoos out there, they're on top of being bunch of liberals, of course, they don't care about this country. And now we're finding out, the more we research it, they're being paid to protest. They're being paid to speak out. It's sickening. People will turn treason on their country for their 30 pieces of silver,
Hmm.
you know. So that's what I think. I think that's the message.
How does this look playing out in real terms, other than, the legal precedent or the social environment, or how does this physically look? So DC, they have the National Guard there, and I believe a couple other cities. What is this something that we won't even see? Is this special forces? Or is it just more outright kind of in your face, a game of numbers through national just saturation, just fill up a city? Because it seems like, again, talk to you, I talked to Prado, they all seem to say and Dale and Joe Teta, all Title 50 guys, they all seem to say this is very significant. And so what does that look, or is it so significant that we don't see it? Is it, you know, is it SF? Is it SEALs? Is it, because what does this realistically look like? And I don't even disagree with you. It's so far gone. You've left the door open for 4 years. You have millions of people. And again, it's like what Dale always says. They're like, this is what they're doing because this is what we would do. Of course, it's the right
Yeah,
move. Geopolitically, it's the right move.
yeah,
Is this just outright? Because right now, right, we're seeing certain governors or mayors rejecting federal troops, and it seems more often than not now we're having ICE agents shot. I mean, it's
yeah,
dialing up a notch. What do you see in your, with your experience and your wisdom, and obviously we're just speculating. What do you
yeah.
see? How does this physically play out in this three-dimensional reality we live in?
Well, first place, I don't think it's a political issue. It's a national security issue. And it's not the first time we've deployed federal troops on U.S. soil. If you study history, we've had to do it in the past. And it didn't stay in place, and it's not
1992.
intended to stay in
Sorry, yeah,
place. You know,
Rodney King
what's
riots, right?
that?
H.W. Bush, Rodney King.
Yeah, we had those times. So I think what happens is the way it looks is, it becomes a collaboration between our law enforcement and our military. And I think that um, whichever of those groups is qualified to handle a enemy combatant, and that's what you if and when you're up against an enemy combatant, um, excuse me, um, those who are best trained to handle that are the ones that will handle that. Law enforcement will deal probably with the criminal side of things, but where it becomes an eye awakening moment is when all of a sudden, we have two police officers that respond to a shooting, and they go to a location, and hey, I'm going to just use Dearborn, Michigan again, and an Islamic community, and all of a sudden now you got 27 Al Qaeda members, fully armed, that just killed two cops and they're going to kill every other cop. And so, are they qualified to be there? No. So, do you call in SF? Do you call in Delta? Do you call in MARSOC? Do you call in SEALs? Yeah, you probably do, because now that city has turned into a war zone. And we go, well, that should never happen here. What do you mean it should never happen here? Look at Portland, Oregon. Look at Seattle. Antifa turned it into almost a war zone. But because we weren't Biden and those guys didn't respond to it the way it should have, buildings burned, houses burned, people were hurt by Antifa, so what makes us believe that the next go round they won't be armed with AK-47s, or frag grenades or any other type of weapon that they can get their hands on, because I can tell you this, they can get their hands on it. Okay, they can, and people are willing to step up to the plate and meet with them and go, hey, guess what, I got 200 AK-47s or AK-74s here, and I got this and I got this and I got this here. Let's show those ice guys, let's show the US military who we really are. We're going to own this city, we're taking it down. Hey, Allah Akbar, in Dearborn, Michigan, and no one comes and tells us we will rule America, we will destroy America, which is what they say right now, right? And so you have to figure out, wow, looks like this looks like Israel. This looks like Gaza. This looks like, it looks like almost like Paris or other places. And so people where people are not I think where people are missing it is that we believe that it can never happen here in our country. It can never be a war zone. The media doesn't cover the border down in Texas and all the things the local sheriffs down there have had to do against the cartel, where it's armed conflict. They don't cover that, but it happens. All right, we get something in a city where we have police officers defending themselves and they shoot a criminal. All right. Well, that's a big deal to the American public. And they think that's as far as it's going to go. It's not as far as it's going to go. And everybody that has been downrange understands how this unfolds. And that's why we're trying to take preventative measures. So I think that if it comes to, well, I can tell you right now, we know for a fact Al Qaeda's here. We know for a fact the Taliban are already in the United States and more are coming. And you go, well, we'll recognize them because they'll be dressed. No, they'll be clean shaven. They'll go against everything that they believe in with their religion, so to speak. They'll tattoo out their arms. They'll look like everybody else, but they'll be as deadly because guess what? They've been fighting everybody since the beginning of time over in Afghanistan. The Iranians, and we deal with the Iranians and their stuff as well. Then we're dealing with, what about maybe nuclear weapons that have already come into the United States? What about the cells that have been sitting here for 10, 15 years that want to destroy the United States? So when it all gets activated at one time, it could turn into total chaos here. And without military on our own shore, we won't be able to suppress it. Now, and this is a time in history when, many of us who are veterans have, gotten a little wiser to fighting offshore and realized that a lot of political agendas and a lot of blood spilled so that people could make money. And generally the conversation is like, we're not doing it anymore. But guess what? All of those veterans, if there are 50 million of them here in the United States, are willing to do what they have to do, which is protect our shoreline and protect our country. So whether it's conventional uniformed soldiers, keep in mind that about 50 million, and that number I may be off on that number a little bit. 50 million veterans took an oath for a lifetime to defend this country against enemies, foreign and domestic. Soldiers in civilian attire. That's who we, the people, are. No different than when the militia got started. So here's a word to the bad guys. If you think that you're going to be able to just fight up against uniformed soldiers, you're sadly mistaken, because guess what? There's a lot of soldiers still around, and guess what? We'll come after you just as well. And that could be the outcome here in America. And people say, well, it would be civil war. No, it's not civil war. No, it's going after bad people, going after the cartel, going after child sex traffickers, going after the Islamic community that radicalizes and says they want to overthrow the government. It's going after Antifa. But Tommy, ultimately, here's where it's gonna unfold really soon. The minute you have an ICE officer shot by Antifa or by the cartel or by someone out of the Islamic community, is when the gloves come off. And then it's not rubber bullets anymore. And nor should it be rubber bullets, nor should it be smoke. That's armed conflict, and you should fight fire with fire. And I don't think they believe that that's what's going to happen. I think that they believe that this administration is soft and that most Americans are soft and will scream about, wow, you shot them. They're dead. Yeah. Guess what? They shot us first and our guys are dead. I think that's where it's going. And you know what? It should go there. It should go there. Now that means I'm not advocating violence, but what I'm saying is when you're in armed conflict, there's only one thing you can do to stay alive. You fight. You fight. And the military, our military, I believe, is still the best military in the entire planet. Now you've got Pete Hiscart up there giving his speech as well, and I know he's behind it. So, and I believe he's probably well versed in what the law is and what we can do, what the War Department can do and cannot do. So I think that's what we're going to see. And there might be some quiet stuff too. There might be some special operations guys that would go in and take out a cell and coordinate that with local law enforcement. And we never hear anything about it, which is okay as well. But here's what we're up against. What do you do when you go into a city and you're going to go up against, well, again, we'll just use radical Islam. But yeah, the chief of police is a Muslim, or the mayor of New York City is a Muslim. Really, you think it's going to be a fair fight? No, it's not.
It does, and yeah, of course, legally, we're not advocating for violence, but it does seem to be like it does kind of need to go there. It's the trajectory is going, and I think that's exactly it. I think they assume that the U.S. government won't fight fire with fire. I think that's what it's going to come to. It's as old. It's the oldest tale of time. It's going to be the show of force, the escalation to de-escalation. And I think that's what it's going to be. You're probably going to have an ICE officer or some police officer shot, and it's going to be very clear who it is. And then they're going to get bulldozed, and everyone's going to be shocked because it's not going to be the police. It's going to be the Rangers. It's going to be Green Berets.
Yeah.
It's going to be Delta. Well, you wouldn't see Delta, but like it's going to be something like that. And that does seem to be unfortunately where it's going, but I don't think it is avoidable. I think if we're at a fork in the road, and if you don't do this now, you will have to do it eventually and fight a civil war. So it's you're chopping off one leg or you're not chopping off the leg and you're dying of sepsis. It's not a great choice to be, and we could have avoided this, but we can't go back in time. This is where we are now. Um, do you think this overlaps with the huge meeting of all the generals at the Pentagon for with Trump and Hegseth? Because it doesn't really seem like whatever they spoke about there was the reason they called them all back. It just seemed like a normal, seems like a speech that I think somebody said it could have been a Trump tweet. Like it could have. It's pretty
Yeah, could have been.
irregular to have them all brought back globally, and then a day later, they released this whole thing about irregular warfare on U.S. soil in Title 50. Do you think the two are overlapped?
Yeah, they could be in a little bit. I wasn't in there. I pretty much saw
Sure.
I was actually over at the Pentagon during that, uh, the day that all of that was happening. And I think I think a little bit of it could have been. I think they're talking about it. I think that most of those generals understand that we have an enemy within. But here's the problem, and I think Pete understands this because our three-letter agencies, NSA, CIA, DIA, because they're all still woked out, okay, and they're still corrupt. The heads of those organizations are only allowing the military and Trump to know what they want them to know. I know that for a fact, okay? And there are people that run those organizations that are compromised, and we keep beating down the door at 47's office and saying, sir, please, I know you think this is a good person. It's not. Okay. So I think Pete may understand that. I think the vice president now understands it because I understand he's had some meetings with some people, and he wanted to make sure probably that there was no excuse, that everybody got the word. And the best way to do that is to bring them all into the same room so they'll never have an excuse to say, well, I didn't hear you, or I didn't understand my mission, or whatever it may be. Even the military has got to be cleaned up. My a close friend of mine, he's a former general. When I went into his office to have a meeting, one of the very first things he said to me is, "Wow, my first job here is to clean up all the woke stuff here in the Pentagon because it still exists. The attitude. Now, what's interesting is as the more I study the woke attitude, the more I see it threaded with Marxism.
Hmm.
DEI, the same thing. I see, and so it all came in Marxism, communism, socialism. It all came in under the blanket of something else, being called something else. It's kind of like you and I have talked about. Pedophile is a pedophile, and yet the LGBTQ XYZ wants to legitimize them by saying they're minor attracted persons. So if they change the name, people won't think it's the same thing. Well, look, you can not say Marxism, but talk about DEI, talk about woke. It's all Marxism, the whole stuff. It's all part of the plan. So it'll be interesting to see us hold the line when it comes to protecting the country. And after Pete had that meeting, I remember talking to some other people in Washington and they said, well, there could be some generals that want to retire. It's like, then retire, get the heck out of the country. If you're not going to uphold the Constitution, then quit disgracing the uniform. And now I can say that, even at my age, because I remember in my Marine Corps career, I was told, look, hey, if you stay in the Corps instead of bouncing over to the agency, by the time you retire, you'll probably be a general. Okay. So I understand that mentality. And I have friends who are generals and stuff, and they'll say the same thing. You know what? Lead, follow, or get the heck out of the way. And I have no tolerance. And I think a lot of Americans now, good Americans, have no tolerance for what we went through under the Biden administration, under the Clinton administration, under Obama administration, and all of it's coming out. Obama's going to get hammered. That was a coup. I mean, Brennan, all those guys, it's all coming out, and they are traitors to this country. And I think they should be dealt with accordingly like that. I mean, they boondoggled all the people. They did the smoke and scream. I mean, and everything. So I think right now, going full circle back, I think Pete wanted to basically say, guess what? The gig's up. That's it. You know what? We know what we're looking at. We know what we have to do. And this is what you will do. And I don't care who likes him or who doesn't like him. Guess what? He's the head of the War Department. That's what this president put him in charge of. And I think he's doing a pretty good job of it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it does. It seems like this was the inevitable outcome. I don't really see how this was avoided. I mean, one way to avoid it would be to completely roll over and let them take over the country. The way to challenge it is to what you're seeing now. It's going to be the domestic deployment of the military. There was no middle fork, though. There was no middle option. I really don't believe that. It's one way or the other, and like you said about it being, Marxism. Yeah, no, they war evolves, cat and mouse, missiles, anti-missiles, surveillance, counter surveillance. It makes sense. How would you bring it ashore? Okay, well, they got wise to the Marxist thing. Wrap it up in something else. Wrap it up in just call it Disney, call it whatever. You have to respect the enemy. It's a brilliant move to wrap it up in progressivism in a, progressive first world nation. But ultimately, you can see what it is. It's division, it's identity. So no one has common ground. It's appeal to authority. It is berate everyone. Constant purity test. Constantly shedding off the outer layers of the onion. You can never be fully in, and everybody's terrified of not being in. And that is where it goes. And then lastly is you also see how violent that you saw the people cheering last summer when they almost killed Trump, and then you saw the people cheering when Charlie Neck's carotid artery explodes. You saw people cheer. I mean cheering. I know you said everyone's seen it. That is what they think of you. It is no longer hyperbole.
Right.
If I said that last year, you could say, "Well, Tommy, you're basing that on it hasn't happened yet." You now see it. September 10th, you saw it. You saw a million views on each one, and people unable to hold back their ecstatic glee. It is no longer a hypothetical. That is
Yeah.
and again, and Charlie Kirk was moderate. So if they'll do that to him and then cheer when that is done to him, what do you think they will do to you? There is no there is no option where we don't do this. It's very sad,
Yeah.
but it's where we are, and you have to soberly examine where you are in life. It does no help to just pretend it's not happening. I've tried in my life to pretend
Yeah.
it doesn't work. And I think that's where it's going. And, you know,
Yeah, I think, it's interesting and it's sad. Most conservatives and most real Americans, and people go, what do you mean real Americans? Real Americans act like Americans. You can tell me all day you're an American, then act like American. Study your history, love the Constitution, love God and country, and be prepared to sacrifice for something bigger than yourself. And up until this point, mostly because there was so much oppression from the last administration, even if you said the right thing. Look at the FBI going after parents that would just say, "Hey, you can't tell my kid this or that." I mean, everything was weaponized, and so people of conscience, good conservative Americans, did not want to turn to violence. They just wanted to be, look, I'm going to pray for you, and we're going to pray for the country, and we're sorry that you hate us so much, but if you want to sacrifice us, then we'll be sacrificed, and the list went on and on and on. And pastors backed down during COVID and wouldn't say anything about what the administration was doing, like a bunch of chickens. And that's shameful in our own country. If you look at the forming of a country, how many pastors were involved in forming this country, as a Judeo-Christian nation, I mean, it's off the charts. Study your history, you'll see it. So everybody's trying to go against the grain. And then finally, some people are waking up and going, wait a minute, to the liberals, to the Democrats, to the Marxists, to the non-Americans, saying, wait a minute, we didn't start this fight. We didn't want this fight, but by God, we're going to finish it. And you start it, and guess what? We're going to be relentless. And so, do I advocate going after them in whatever fashion is appropriate during the time if you're being assaulted or whatever? Absolutely. You fight fire with fire. And I encourage all Americans, real Americans, to not put up with it anymore, and actually hold the line and actually fight fire with fire from now on, it's the only way. It's historically speaking, if you allow them to take you to the slaughter, they will, and they don't care. Just like Charlie Kirk, they didn't care, and they laughed at it and everything. That tells you a lot, just like you said, Tommy, about their mentality. And so, if they loved seeing Charlie Kirk assassinated and what he stood for, God, country, the Constitution, then think about it. If you're one of those same people, how do they feel about you? And would they not only applaud if you were killed, would they participate in killing you? Absolutely, they would. So here's your choice. You either go to the slaughter and your kids go too, and the nation falls, or you stand up and you fight for the republic and you fight against them and you put them in the grave before they put you in the grave if it comes to that time.
and that's just where we are. It
Yeah.
sucks, but it's where we are. But Baz, I gotta wrap this up. Appreciate you doing this
All
on
right,
short
man.
notice,
Thanks for
and
the thanks for the time today.
yes, sir. I'll text this to you when it's up. And guys, please go in the description. Please go follow Baz. Please go check out ARC, the Association for the Recovery of Children. It is a 501(c)(3). You can donate. It is tax deductible, and it's just the right thing to do. So, Baz, love you, brother. Thank you so much.
All right, man. God bless you guys. Thanks
God
so much.
bless.